Okay, questions like this can be kind of tricky, but there is one of these on your test. Um, it's, I mean, it's just like this. It's slightly different, but pretty similar. So um, I reworded this. This is from your homework, so you've done this before, but it says you know that three unlabeled bottles, A, B, and C, each contain one of the following solutions. So you have AgNO3, CaCl2, and Al2SO43. You perform an experiment by adding barium nitrate and sodium chloride to each and get the data below. What is the solution in each bottle? Justify your answer. There's 3 or 4 different ways to do this, but wow, I don't know. Let's just look at AgNO3 and what we know about Ag. Um, we know by now that Ag you should know, I should say, it will form a precipitate with Ag and anything from family 7, so Cl, Br, and I. Those will form precipitates. It will form a precipitate. Well, that looks like I'm looking at your solubility rules. That's good enough to go from here. So just this information should help you to identify which one is probably silver, because if you look here, um, sodium chloride, when it was added to A, it made no precipitate. So we would know that A definitely is not silver nitrate. When it was added to B, it made a precipitate. So it probably is. And when it's added to C, it made no precipitate. All right, so bottle B must be AgNO3 because it's the only one that formed precipitate with the chloride ion. Remember, in this problem, sodium will have nothing to do with anything because it never forms a precipitate. So really, we're looking at the Cl minus. So we have AgNO3 taken care of so far. Let me get rid of most of this. I'll just write AgNO3 again here. All right, so that one's taken care of. If we look here, we have calcium chloride. Um, and calcium is an exception when it is added to SO4, but we are not mixing these two things together. We're mixing calcium chloride with these things. So you should notice calcium chloride wouldn't form a precipitate with NaCl because it already has a Cl on the end. And so that is essentially nothing. And then barium chloride, the Cl thing or ion, does not form a precipitate with that. So that would tell you that this one must be CaCl2 because it doesn't form a precipitate with either one of these two things. All right, so that leaves this one left to be Al2SO43 or aluminum sulfate. So we're done with this one. So we could move on from there, but there is proof to that as well. The sulfate ion, according to our rules, does form a precipitate with barium. Barium sulfate is insoluble, so to double check that we're right, we would make sure that this has a precipitate formed, and it does. Okay, so you could identify your 3 bottles as those, and then use the fact that aluminum sulfate formed a precipitate with barium to prove that A was bottle, or that it was bottle A. You could use the proof that silver nitrate formed a precipitate with sodium chloride or chloride, um, to produce a precipitate to justify it. And then you could also include that neither um, one of these formed a precipitate, and that proved that bottle C was calcium chloride. So hopefully that helps you with that one. It's all about what forms a precipitate with what thing.